All right, let's dive into something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, but is actually happening in labs as we speak. We're talking about building a conscious mind from actual living cells and hooking it up to a computer. Yeah, it's wild. Let's get into it. So the big question, and this comes right from a really fascinating paper by Yaqub Fathalahi and Kawsar Alami, is this: can we actually do it? Can we build a conscious silicon brain? And look, we're not just talking about another smart AI. We're talking about something that could potentially have some level of awareness. I mean, what a goal, right? It is incredibly ambitious. To really get a grip on just how massive this challenge is, look at this number: 100 billion. That's roughly how many neurons are firing away in your brain right now. And those neurons, they're making something like 100 trillion connections. Trying to recreate that, that is the ultimate puzzle. So where do you even start with a puzzle that enormous? Well, the approach we're going to look at today is pretty clever. It treats the whole thing like a recipe, breaking down the construction of a mind into actual manageable biological steps. Okay, so the very first ingredient in this recipe, it's not what you think, it's not code, it's not silicon chips. No, it starts with life itself. The whole foundation is built from stem cells, the body's amazing master cells that have the potential to become pretty much any kind of cell we need them to be. And what do scientists do with these stem cells? They grow these. They're called brain organoids. And you should really just think of them as mini brains in a dish. Seriously. They're these tiny 3D clusters of brain tissue that actually organize themselves, copying the basic structure and even the electrical buzz of a developing brain. This gives us a peek into how biological learning actually works, in a way that just running a computer simulation never could. So here you can see exactly how they pull this off. Scientists take the stem cells and kind of coax them along with these very specific chemical signals. These signaling factors basically tell the cells what to do, guiding them to grow and assemble into these incredible organoid structures. It's like directed biological self-assembly. The cells do the hard work themselves. Okay, a single organoid that's amazing on its own, but let's be real, the human brain isn't just one big uniform piece of tissue, right? It's got all these different regions that are constantly talking to each other. So the next question is, how in the world do you replicate that level of complexity? Well, the answer is pretty brilliant. You build brain assembloids. I love this analogy. If an organoid is like one department in a company, say the engineering team, then an assembloid is like getting engineering, marketing, and R&D to all work together in the same building. You literally fuse different kinds of organoids together, each one mimicking a different brain region, to create a much more complex, interconnected system. And this diagram just shows that process perfectly. You can see these separate organoids, each one grown to act like a different part of the brain. Then, they're brought together. They're co-cultured, which is a fancy way of saying they're grown in the same dish so they can start forming connections and talking to each other. The result? A way more sophisticated biological network. All right, so we've got the biological hardware, but that's just the start. How do you actually get it to learn anything? Well, this is where things get really interesting. This is where biology meets AI. It's a whole new field they're calling organoid intelligence, and it's all about making living brain tissue and artificial intelligence work together. And the absolute key to teaching this mini brain is this feedback loop. It's basically a 4-step dance. First, you stimulate the assembloid. You give it some kind of input. Second, you record how the brain cells react to that. Third, you get an AI to decode all those complicated signals actually mean. And then, for the final step, the AI sends back targeted feedback. It becomes both a translator and a teacher for this living network. It's incredible. So let's take a step back. We now have a biological brain that can learn. That's huge. But there's a massive piece of the puzzle still missing. Think about it. A brain just floating in a dish has zero context. It has no connection to the world. It's essentially blind, deaf, and completely isolated. And this leads us to a really deep question, both philosophical and biological. It's called the embodiment problem. Basically, to have a mind, do you need a body? Really think about it for a second. Can you really understand what red is if you've never had eyes to see it? Or cold if you've never had skin to feel it? The authors of this paper really drive this point home. The theory goes that consciousness isn't just a bunch of neurons firing in a specific pattern. It emerges when a brain interacts with a world, through a body, when it's getting that constant flood of information from senses. So if building a whole physical body is way too complicated, what's the next best thing? A virtual one. This is the workaround. Instead of a real body, you give it a digital avatar. And what's so cool is that an avatar in a virtual world, like a metaverse, can give the brain everything it needs. It gets sensory input, it can interact with virtual objects, and it can even develop what researchers call a sense of embodiment. The brain feels like it has a body. And now we put it all together. This is the grand finale. We take the biological assembloid, we connect it to the AI teacher, and we give it the virtual body. This, right here, is the complete blueprint for a conscious silicon brain. Okay, this is the money shot. This diagram shows the whole shebang. Let's walk through it. Right at the center, you've got the living brain assembloid. Its neural activity gets recorded and piped over to the AI, which decodes it. That AI then controls an avatar in a virtual world. And here's the magic. Everything that avatar sees, hears, or touches gets turned back into electrical signals and fed back to the assembloid as sensory input. The loop is closed. The brain is now experiencing a world. I know this sounds absolutely mind-blowing, but it raises a really important question. Why? Why even do this? What's the point of building a conscious machine? Well, the potential implications, they're just profound. I mean, for one, by building a mind from scratch, we might finally start to figure out the mechanics of our own consciousness. Think about it. This could totally change how we study and model devastating brain diseases like Alzheimer's. It could lead to huge leaps in medical science, and even kickstart a whole new field of super powerful, super efficient biocomputing. The list just goes on. And that really brings us to the final big thought to leave you with. This kind of research forces us to face one of the biggest questions there is. If we actually succeed, if we build a machine that has some form of consciousness, what will its experience of the world actually be like? And maybe more importantly, what will that teach us about ourselves?